The Cloakroom, your weekly look behind the scenes at the New Hampshire State House, brought to you by the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. I'm your host, Grant Bosse. This week, a progress report. 2 months down, 4 months to go, facing a June 30th deadline, the end of the fiscal year, and the last day for the legislature and governor to agree on a 2-year budget for the state of New Hampshire. Earlier this week, House Majority Leader DJ Bettencourt provided an update for how the House is doing, handling the state's projected $900 million deficit.
Facing a nearly $1 billion deficit when we came into office by the Democrats. And while we cannot expect this problem to be solved overnight, we have worked extremely hard and believe that we have made substantial progress in the right direction. Without question, our most powerful accomplishments thus far have been our fiscally conservative, common sense approach to our state budget, which public opinion polls have established as the most pressing issue facing our state. In passing House Resolution 11, we made it clear to our constituents that Republicans are not going to continue the spending spree of the past, and we are certainly not going to continue the practice of raising taxes and fees.
Joined now on the backbench by Mike Brunelle. He is, among other things, my state representative in Manchester Ward 3, executive director of the New Hampshire Democratic Party, and Democratic floor leader here in the New Hampshire House. Now, Mike, we're a third of the way through the legislative session. We heard Majority Leader Bettencourt talking about progress that's being made on the budget. How do you see the budget process coming together?
Well, I think it's obviously a challenge. Because of lagging state revenues, we have to make sure that we're acting responsibly, looking at all areas of government and trying to find efficiencies. I think that when you talk about progress and some of the things that the Majority Leader said yesterday, we haven't passed any tax cuts. Those have all been tabled, and as we move forward, I think that we need to make sure that we're doing things responsibly so we don't downshift. I think that a lot of the responsibility of state government is to make sure that we're providing essential services and not increasing property taxes at the local level. So that's my biggest concern. Can we do this responsibly, efficiently, tighten our belts where we need to, and also make sure that we're not balancing the budget on the backs of property taxpayers?
Downshifting was a big part of Bettencourt's message yesterday. He didn't like that part of the governor's budget, particularly the cut in state subsidies to local retirement plans. It's about $140, $150 million of this budget balancing package that the governor has. How do you get there without cutting the half of the budget that's aid to cities and towns?
Well, that's the big challenge, and that's what we've heard from Majority Leader Bettencourt, that they're not going to touch aid to cities and towns. You mentioned it, half of the budget is that, but I would also say that the other half of the budget, which is education, it's also corrections and health and human services, severe, deep cuts that aren't focused on making sure that we're being efficient and keeping programs that help people at the local level will also lead to downshifting. So it's a balancing act for sure. It's something that we have to take very close consideration with and make sure that we are doing this in a very responsible manner. It's going to be tough. I haven't heard from the majority yet about where specifically they're going to cut. I know there's about 10 days left to get this budget done, basically, given the processes that have to be followed before crossover, and we're waiting intently to see where these cuts are going to be made and looking at them to see if we can go along with them if they're responsible.
You mentioned revenues. February, very disappointing month, came in about $16 million. It's a small month, but it's a bad sign. Do you see this as evidence that maybe the governor's revenue estimates were a little too optimistic and the House revenue numbers might be more accurate?
Well, I think that the big month, obviously, is the month of March and April, and we have to see what the trends are in those 2 months to see where we're going to head down the road. I do not believe that growth is going to be anemic. New Hampshire has led the economic recovery. I think that if you look at what most economists are saying, they're saying that the national economy, GDP, is going to increase about 4%. So I think that we need to see where the trends are, but I don't believe 1% growth, which is where we were in 2008, in the height of the recession, is probably realistic. So we're going to have to see what happens in March and April, and we're going to have to make adjustments, but right now I would err on the side of caution to say that we're going to only see growth in our revenues and economy at a 1% level.
Turning from the budget to education funding, Majority Leader Bettencourt yesterday very optimistic about the prospects for a constitutional amendment on the ballot next fall.
Toward a constitutional amendment that allows the legislature to target aid, that takes the handcuffs off the legislature's ability to fund education in New Hampshire. As I said to you in the beginning, we started this process with several shared goals in common, and we have worked hard. There have been numerous discussions. Each side or really there are three sides in this, have listened to each other, taken into account where each other feels that they need to be. Obviously in the House we're most concerned with an amendment that will satisfy the requisite number of representatives to pass out of the House and on to the Senate. And we're confident that we're doing
The
that.
prospects.
Well, we're going to have to see what the language is. Again, we have not been able to see what would be included in that. We, as Democrats, we have supported a constitutional amendment in the past. A lot of folks did back when I served in 2007, 2008. But we have to make sure that we are enshrining in our Constitution our responsibility as a state to provide for an adequate education for our children at the local level and across the Granite State. So I'd like to see what that says. When a deal is made and we get to see the language, then we can move forward and analyze that. But certainly, I don't think Democrats are going to support anything that allows the state to skirt their responsibility to provide an adequate education for all of our children.
The state's been dealing with an education funding crisis for over a decade now. We turn to what I call the next crisis, the New Hampshire retirement system. And here's DJ Bettencourt earlier this week talking about a plan to reform the state's pensions.
Reform is also a main point of our agenda, and we have begun that task by meeting with almost every public sector employee union group that would agree to meet with us. We have ensured that they have had the opportunity to be heard and feel that they have a seat at the table. The Special Committee on Public Employee Pension Reforms is working tirelessly to find ways to address the nearly $4 billion unfunded liability. And we anticipate that the House and Senate will have a comprehensive solution in the near future.
Senate moving with an omnibus solution, the House dealing with a number of bills. We turn back to Mike Brunelle here on the back bench. What do you see as the prospects for pension reform, and what are the sticking points between where House Democrats, the governor, and the Republican Party are in this?
Well, the biggest thing that I think everybody can agree upon is that we need to rethink the way that we approach the retirement system. You've seen labor groups and other groups come together and say, look, we need to fix this pension problem. But what I think the biggest sticking point is that we're not going to privatize. We will not stand for privatizing the system. You see some proposals out there that would put money into 401ks, put money into the hands of Wall Street. That's the reason why I believe was a big contributing factor into the national economic downturn. So any proposal that includes privatization or that is unrealistic and are not fulfilling our commitment to these individuals that put their lives on the line for us, cops, firefighters, or teach our students, is not going to be a starting point. I think that the governor went further than some of the reforms that were suggested by folks that are in labor or other groups like fire, police, teachers. But I think that we need to have a collaborative process. I think we need to look at the pros and the cons. And I don't think that we need to rush to fix a problem that's really existed for a very long time. And I think that both Republicans and Democrats can agree that previous legislatures are the reason why we're in the problem in the first place. You know, not living up to our obligation, and money was being shifted to various areas, and that's why we're facing this big unfunding of the system. So we need to make sure that we're not privatizing it. We need to make sure that we're living up to our commitment, and we're not making it really unbearable for the people that put their lives on the line for us. So I'll be interested in seeing what is in their final proposals. I think that we need to protect health care, we need to protect their retirement, but tweaks need to be made. There's no doubt that we need to rethink it, because right now there is a shortfall and it needs to be addressed.
We've been asking you to respond to the House Majority Progress Report that they put out this week. What do House Democrats have on the agenda? Where do you want to see the legislature moving in the next 4 months?
Well, I think that we need to move away with some of the things that have been coming to the floor. I don't think that, getting rid of kindergarten, which thankfully didn't pass, lowering the dropout age to 16, some of the things that we've seen with health care, getting rid of all insurance mandates, some of the things that we've seen with health care and children, not allowing them to have food stamps and get the food and nourishment they need because of something that their parents did. If you look at the wide range of things, repealing the minimum wage, I don't think that that's really been in line with what we were all elected to do, Republican or Democrat. That's make sure that the budget is balanced and create jobs and move the economy forward. And I don't think any of the proposals thus far has created one job. And I think we need to refocus on our commitment to getting good jobs for people, lowering the unemployment rate, and making sure that we responsibly balance the budget. I'd like to hear more talk about that, and not to be flip or anything, but less 3-week press conferences to try to refocus the agenda. Let's focus together, collaboratively, and let's work across the aisle to make sure we get these things done.
Democratic Floor Leader Mike Brunelle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
2 months down, 4 months to go in this legislative session. We'll keep you updated right here in the Cloakroom.